The last one I didn't think was going to upload. It's just sympathy for the devil was playing Rolling Stones. Whenever I upload those, I'll do it later just for mail. It's just a little confusing. It's for mail. You do it on Facebook. It's you upload music, copyright. So it's checked. I'll do a few more. I would have got to the better spot. By the Alamo Dome and spots. I can't tell you all the spots. You know, a few years ago, I just want you to see why it's really not a matter of the few cases I gave you the last few weeks, none of these things are, and maybe the public thinks, maybe the public reaction would be, these things can't be true. I guarantee you, they are true. And hopefully some of it you saw a little different, like the culture within any entity, police, fire. I gave the little example of the cigarette investigation. And I do understand that the public is surprised at some things. I want to give you just one indication. I don't think any of the blogging or speaking is going to change any of this, to be honest. I think if the local chief knew, he knows all this, I don't think he would want to do anything about it. Okay, just for reasons that I explained. The best example for those who read local media, and I'm not, look, they changed this policy, but we had a lot of bad incidents of domestic violence and women that died. And a lot of those instances that they have now corrected it, you know, what they needed to correct, but this would just be one example. Some of the women had called the cops to report domestic violence or threats by their spouses or boyfriends. And later, after they had called the cops, then they were killed. A couple of famous cases, sad, tragic. So what the local Caller Times did, and the former editor was Libby Aver, they knew that what happened was the CCPD did not have domestic violence open on the weekends. So some people, if they called about domestic violence, and it was pretty deplorable, okay, like not responding to car wrecks type thing, you know, though they had to change that. All right, so they put a lot of pressure. The Caller Times put pressure, and it showed you the arrogance, okay, of the department. They put pressure thinking, as they did a whole series in the Caller Times on domestic violence, I think it was called Broken Doors. Libby Avert herself, the former editor, she was very active. And after all of that came out, like, geez, you know, you guys were not open on the weekends. Some of the women actually contacted the police department, later were killed. After all that came out, you would think that they would have immediately said, oh, we realize there's a big flaw in our system. The first response that they had, the Chief Markle and a couple of others, was they were not going to change things. Now, Libby Avert was like me, in the sense that you could see her anger when she finally took to the pen and wrote a huge thing. Now, it took a lot of pressure for them to correct that. And you would have thought that being that's their jobs, they would have corrected it on their own. Finally, after the local media and, you know, then they made changes. Okay, so there's no way the chief, there's no way any of my stuff, hopefully it'll just keep them off of my kids, not harassing my family anymore. If I could get that out of this, that would be a benefit for them. We also had in our area of Turtle Cove, where I live, look, I know a lot of people that are involved in all types of lifestyles. And just for those of you that are local media people, we had an interesting thing that happened in my neighborhood called Turtle Cove. A lot of the neighbors were complaining about, quote, some drug house. I don't know which drug house or who they were complaining about. But I've had friends that have done, you know, been on the streets. And so whoever it was, obviously because it came out on the news. Well, when they made various complaints, what the Corpus Christi Police Department did under Markle, they never did this under Simpson or others. This Corpus Christi Police Department runs the code enforcement. And look, they have used code enforcement in different cases where they have put liens on people's houses for minor stuff. Now, this was the one I'll tell you now. We'll give you a little insight. After the citizens kept complaining, quote, drug houses, drug problems at the park, drug use, code enforcement, which is the cops under their direction, they came through our neighborhood and did a sweep. And they put warnings on people's homes. I got one on my house. Mine was probably legitimate, like clean the gutter. But the warnings were like notices. If you don't fix it within 10 days, the city can put a lien on your house. That's on the notice. Well, some of the people that complained in my neighborhood, they actually put notices on. They had a vehicle parked in the driveway and had an inspection sticker. So they got the notice. Somebody had a fence, a nice fence, a new fence, and it was like an inch high. They got the notice. You got to correct it within 10 days or you're going to... Look, what happened there, the local community of Turtle Cove went to the media. Now, this is what I want you to see. And they were scared, like, we think he targeted us. Then the chief came out and said, well, the reason that happened is if we can correct, like, the inspection sticker on a vehicle, one guy, I think, had a tire in the yard, the fence too high. The chief said, this is a way we enforce. We noticed, like, if we enforce code violations and the community is clean, and that neighborhood's a clean neighborhood, then it'll cut down on crime. But what the other people felt was they were targeted by the police department because they kept making complaints. And it was funny because they did a whole community meeting with the Chief Markle and others at the local school where my daughters used to attend. I believe it was the school building. And then the chief said, oh, don't worry, you guys misunderstood. And then I saw some of the ladies, like, we felt scared, but now he made us feel better. Do you know what domestic abuse is? Look, that neighborhood got the message, okay? And what you thought initially happened is what happened, okay? Let me just tell you that. Because they didn't appreciate that you were complaining about certain activities within Turtle Cove, all right? I'll leave it at that. But it was interesting because some of the ladies that lived in the neighborhood, and they were complaining. They said, oh, my neighbor, he's got to tear his fence down. Then Markle and them said, we're going to drop it. Don't worry about the code violation. Look, domestic violence, I'm giving you a scenario. It happens where somebody puts somebody else on notice. Like, oh, he might beat me, he might do this. And then what you do is you learn to live with it. Like, okay, well, and that little instance put that community where I live, Turtle Cove, on notice. Don't you ever complain again about certain activities. Because that bluff and Mr. Markle and all, they're all from there for many years, okay? And some of the other things I spoke about a few years ago, I haven't mentioned at all on the recent rollouts. But it had to do with people that had been there for many years and a lot of things they got away with. So my blogging on this is hopefully, I'll be honest, that my kids don't get harassed like that. Cops going by their house and entering their residence. So, but there's no... Look, Libby Avert in the Kohler Times and local media, after all the things they did on the domestic violence, finally, they said, okay, we'll be open on the weekends for that. Okay?